First of all, thank you very much for coming, Jordan Levy.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, go ahead.
We were just discussing this. I asked you this before.
Yeah.
Metro Toronto is nearly 6 million people now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's the same size as roughly the state of Israel.
Right.
State of Israel is the third most prominent venture invested country on earth. Something to the tune of $7.5 billion this year will be invested in startups in Israel. Every major venture firm in North America and most of the European funds have offices there. Toronto is a city with tremendous intellectual capital, phenomenal diversity, very large immigrant community of very smart people that have come to find fame and fortune, I guess. Yet, it's a disaster when it comes to startup VC investment. It doesn't exist. I guess we could count as many VCs in Buffalo, which is obviously dormant, and a fraction of the size, yet I don't get it. So I would love you guys to tell me what happened.
I would argue that because of all of the natural resources here in Canada, you tend to have a lot of investment in that, whereas since Israel doesn't have the extent of the resources that we do, and that's not such a big part of its GDP, that investment perhaps needs to go into things that produce disproportionate returns on investment, like technology. So I think that a lot of the cash and capital has been made off the natural resources here, whether it's oil, gas, lumber, and that's kind of skewed the expertise of the people with capital towards extraction of natural resources, whereas in some places that might not be as much the case.
You really want to debate that with me? I don't think so. I mean, yes, there's a lot of money that's been made and a lot of investment in natural resources throughout this vast, beautiful country, but it doesn't change the fact that it's a world financial center, which is migrated from Montreal to Toronto now, and this is a major world financial center. That hasn't had an impact. It doesn't change the fact that there's all these people starting these businesses, graduating from great schools. We're going to Waterloo from here, and I can tell you from the U.S. point of view, Waterloo is looked at very much like University of Chicago and Columbia and Caltech and MIT. It's at the same level in terms of the way U.S. companies look at recruiting from talent there. And then you have all the other stuff. So, that doesn't make sense, but we're going to keep going.
And two counterpoints, by the way. If you want to look for cowboys and risk takers, you go to mining and oil and gas, and they're not making $2 to $10 million bets. They're making $100 million bets. So there's lots of appetite for risk in this country.
But where's that?
And
it also doesn't change the fact that what I said is every major U.S. venture fund has a facility, an office, and a team in Israel.
that was because of Yasma.
No, that was because that's because when if you remember the old comment when Willie Sutton, they asked him why he robbed banks, because that's where the money was. We're there because that's where the opportunities are. And I don't know how that's not happening here the same way. That's what's perplexing to me.
We're regulated to the teeth, okay? CRTC is right now fighting Netflix. Netflix for what? Delivering TV through the internet. They want to regulate Netflix, and they fight everything. Every regulated body fights whatever innovation takes place outside of the regulated bodies.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So banking, telecommunications, what else we got? I'm sure we can come up with more. Those are just a couple of things. What was it? I'm sure there's more, but we are regulated to the teeth, and some body out there just stops things that just doesn't make any sense when it comes to innovation.
So those major stakeholders in the private sector, the alleged private sector of Toronto, it's not like New York.
No, but
big media.
BlackBerry, and we can debate BlackBerry. BlackBerry was the dominant provider of smartphones in the world. They were located in Canada.
That's
Nortel
right.
at one time dominated switches for telephones. Corel in its day, and I dealt with Michael Copeland, and they had a phenomenal, there's been no shortage of companies coming out of here, so regulation didn't stop them. And I can tell you right now, there's a bunch of companies that I saw today that should be funded. Why aren't the VCs here?
What I'm saying is, we're good starters, we're not good enders.
Oh, you're not finishers, okay.
No,
So
No,
here's
and I know.
another perspective.
Go ahead.
Name, rank.
Jeff Folds, I've got a startup called Affinity. We're working on a platform for being able to do product configurators for everything from medical devices to aircraft parts. In my experience in the Canadian tech business goes back 20 years as a principal of a startup, as a business development guy for companies that actually managed to survive the meat grinder, which is trying to get off the ground in Canada. And I can tell you that it is, the problem we have here is that we almost have too good a university system, because it's spitting out fabulous ideas and fabulous people at a rate that you just can't comprehend. And if you're gonna make those kinds of things work, everybody's focused on the technical risk. Technical risk is actually the easy part. The hard part is the executional risk to scale that business.
Marketing.
And we're really good, if you look at IRAP and SHRED, at funding mechanisms to get ideas out of the lab and getting them started. And there's this black hole that you hit when you get past that to actually scale the business. And far, far too many businesses are forced to either sell out way too early. That's why you've got GE set up in the north end of town, just scooping up all these great businesses at a really discounted
But
price.
Hootsuite didn't, and they stayed independent. They just closed a
Yeah,
$50
well,
million
sure.
round. I think they announced
You
it
could-
yesterday,
Right.
right?
You can pick an
That's
exception.
Homer's money.
You can pick an exception to every rule, but I'm telling you in terms of the volume and the quantity of what I've seen, this is what tends to happen. You look at the TSX, they have this lovely slide deck that shows all the financing activity on the TSX. And they have a massive pile of, I don't know how many billions, I've forgotten, that goes into oil and gas and mineral exploration all over the planet. It is the #1 financial market on the planet if you want to do oil and gas and mining exploration financing. Then they have this other little slice of the pie that's about this big.
It's 3%. And if it.
And that's their entire
Technology.
technology investment, and that's
But when-
IT, that's
when-
medical devices, that's biotech, it's pharma, it's everything. And you cannot get off the ground unless you've got some sort of depth to go with all that.
But if you.
And that's the problem.
And when BlackBerry and Nortel were both kicking, it was 33% of the TSX.
The other thing I think that and I asked a question, is the angel community. I mean, there's a lot of wealth in Toronto, obviously. I'm talking about Toronto, let's not even discuss, the western states, let's just focus on Toronto. There's huge wealth here. I watch the city, I'm among the older people in the room, and I've been coming here since I was a little kid. And we came alive. I worked for a Canadian company one time. I worked for an ad agency that was headquartered on Prince Arthur. And I came here, once or twice a week. I owned a company here. We started Ingram Micro Canada here. We bought a company called Aviva Software. So I was up here, right? So I've been coming here my whole life. I used to come and shop. I bought all my clothes at Harry Rosen when the dollar was 60 cents. It was the greatest thing in the world. Right? But seriously, this was where I came for my entertainment and so I've watched this grow. There's huge wealth here. Why aren't the angels as active as they are in so many other places? I'm just confused by it, to be honest with you. We don't have to spend the whole evening talking about it. Something you guys should ponder as a community, and it's something that you guys have to fix, because it won't change unless somebody starts to fix it. And I think that the wealthy angels, somebody has to take the lead and say, I'm going to start doing these things. I'm going to start being an angel network, and we're going to start funding and taking risk. And, I think a lot of people got scared. I watched it in 2001 when the bubble burst, right? And everybody thought up until then they were all making so much money. You put $10,000 in a deal and it's worth $1 million in a year, right? And this is like the lottery. Now that doesn't exist. And so they all went away and they went back to investing in real estate, and they went back to putting you know, investing in oil and gas and mining companies and whatever it is that, you know, everybody, mostly real estate, I guess everybody wants to be in real estate in Toronto. So you gotta fix that. The angel community has to step up and take a lead. And that's really what has done a lot. I mean, people don't realize the success of Silicon Valley. A lot of it has to do with, you know, really the impetus was Hewlett Packard, no matter what anybody wants to say, it was Hewlett Packard. It wasn't anything else. And then it was this network of guys, they were all guys, that left Hewlett Packard because they made a lot of money, and they started to become angels, and they used to have office hours. And they would sit there and they would start writing checks in those days for $5,000 and $10,000 and $20,000. And that's what really started venture investing in Silicon Valley, and that created funds because they started doing it. And these guys are, well, you know, among the wealthiest people on earth today. And we really need that, and we're working hard at that in Buffalo, you know, to get the angels, you know, and it's frustrating to me because my friends who have money, you know, like, well, they all wanted to do it when it was this great, unbelievable surge from 1995 to 2001, but now it's like, you know, they don't want to do it anymore, and I try to convince them it's their social responsibility. I also tell the young entrepreneurs who have been successful, you know, you guys had mentoring, you had us, we helped you. Now you guys got to just take $200,000. You just sold your business for $220 million. One case, Ashok Subramanian, liaison. Just take $200,000, and you're going to put 25 in 8 deals, and then go get a few of the other guys there to do the same. And then these guys that had Campus Labs and other exits sold $60 million, and each of the founders got $20 million. I said, so $200,000, you know, to do what we did for you. You know, and you got to do that, and then you got to go get some of your friends. And if they're only $10,000 check writers, they got to come to the table, and you know that's what it takes to get it going. But you guys have a bigger issue because you have all these companies. You've got to find a way to get these U.S. VCs to show up here, because I haven't been here before, and I live in Buffalo on the weekends. I mean, you know, you guys, you know, those of you that go up to Muskoka on the weekend or whatever, or go to, you know, Crystal Beach, and the New Yorkers that go to the Hamptons. I go from New York, I work in New York, I go to Buffalo on my weekends. That's my Hamptons, right? That's because that's where I'm from. So I drove up here. I haven't been here in years to meet with the tech community or see a deal. John got me here probably 8 years ago. I looked at a couple of companies.
John.
All right. Before when it was the
JLA.
JLA. And I came and looked at a couple of deals, but I didn't do them. But I haven't been here in years, and I live in Buffalo. It's pretty easy, right? And I won't come. So what happens? Fred Wilson comes to my house. I hope you know who Fred Wilson is. And so Fred's been to Buffalo a lot because he's one of my closest friends. And so he came one day, calls me up. He says, I got to go to Waterloo for a kick board meeting.
Right.
And so he said, you know, why don't I come up in Buffalo and I want to see, how, you know, can I get an update on what's gone on with all the startups and the tech stuff and all the stuff you did in your incubator and all this stuff. Came up and spent a day and a half, and then he drove up to Toronto. You know, but it takes that. We got to help you guys do that. So let's go to, what do you want to talk about besides that? That was what I wanted to talk about. Questions?
Comment I've heard from VCs, not at the $20 million stage, but at the $1 million to $3 million, $4 million, that investing outside the country is too risky, that there's too many legislative hurdles. Are you familiar with any of those hurdles and how we can alleviate them?
You know, we'll have a frank talk, and I guess I'll be recorded so I could get myself in trouble. Because VCs, you know, have a tendency to have a lot of excuses, because what they really want to do is they want to make a reservation, but they don't want to use it. So they want to make sure that they have a placeholder in case you're successful. So they'll tell you things like they got regulation. They'll tell you things like it's the wrong stage. They'll tell you things like they're just too busy right now, you know, and it's all unobliterated bullshit. Because when they like a deal, let me tell you something, it's like locusts. We just did a deal, and this is just unusual for us, but we found a deal that we knew was competitive. We went from 6 days from first meeting to a $7 million independent term sheet where we're funding 100% of it in, I think it was 5 or 6 days. That tells you how much due diligence we did. And we competed with 6 other venture funds, all of whom you know the names of.
So finish where you started. Why, what's wrong with VC in Toronto? What's wrong with VC in this country? By the way, the angel class is a bigger asset class in this country than venture capital. So I think angels are kind of carrying their weight now. I mean, it would be great if the whole thing was 3 times bigger.
Right.
And we're in a context where, you know, federal government is kicking out $400 million to try to reboot venture capital in this country, in a context where in the United States, $17 billion went into VC this year, right? And we have no new funds. We've got basically maybe five or 7 people writing checks in this town.
Yeah.
So what's your opinion?
Well, you know, I think that unfortunately, I don't think you have leadership. I mean, I don't say that disrespecting anybody here. I don't think you have leadership that has the kind of stature, status, capability to go out and get the venture community to come take a look. Honestly, I looked at 6 or 7 companies today. There's not one of them that I won't consider having our guys take a deeper look. Why didn't I know before? Like, you know, honestly. So there's no one there's not.
Can I interject for a second? Could you all please tell your politician about that? This is Startup Grind. You're paying for this event, and they're dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into public servants. And this guy is here telling you this. Why? Go ahead. Sorry.
So, no, it's okay. So, I mean, you know, I just think that unfortunately there isn't some leadership, nobody's taken, you know, maybe the guys that are here want to keep it to themselves. I don't know. I don't think that's the case. But, you know, no one's really jumped forward and gone out and said to, you know, again, gone up and said to Mark Andreessen and said to John Doerr and said to Vinod Khosla and said to Fred Wilson and said to Santo Peyote. I mean, I'll go through the list and say, you got to come and see what's going on here. You got to be part of this thing. Come on up here. Come on, you know, come. And that hasn't happened. So they haven't found their way on their own, except for the occasional cherry pick deal, right? Once every while, and I don't know how they find it. There's some analyst, you know, does telemarketing and finds a company, and they show up and something happens. But you know, and then there isn't. I don't think there's unfortunately, there's not a community. You guys are the ecosystem of that community. There isn't a community when you think about, you know, the size of Toronto. This is the community. It's not a big enough community to get that momentum that I think it requires. And then the other thing is you got to have a couple of linchpin successes, you know, and you know, Hootsuite out west. You had the company that created the game that Zynga's Big Game was a Canadian company. They were from, you know, Calgary or Saskatchewan or something like that. I'm trying to remember who that was. I know the name, it's just escaping me. So there's been some pop, but not in Toronto, right? I mean, we don't have those, you know, the giant success that is sort of put it on the map to say, shit, we better go see what's going on. And then the spin-off that happens from that.
Desire to learn? Anybody show you that deal?
Excuse me?
Desire to learn?
I do have one.
No, it's a company, yeah, no, okay.
So,
I mean, it's a big deal
So
here.
what's interesting, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
and I'm not saying there aren't, by the way, but I'm just saying it hasn't created, and it's not because you're in Canada, just understand something. To most of us, Canada is like, Toronto is just another city in the United States. I mean, seriously, there's no chasm, there's no negativity to being in Vancouver or Toronto. You know, maybe anywhere else they look at them and say, you know, like the Flin Flon Bombers kind of thing, right? But seriously, no, Toronto is like, you talk to most American, I mean, it's the most important film center in North America. I mean, that film festival is bigger than anything in the United States, and they come and flock here. There's no issues. There's nothing. It's just, so don't think that there's a stigma. You know, Canada looks like they're the 51st state as to what most Americans think of. Seriously. I know, you know, like, but I mean, I'm just saying that, you know, there's nothing that stops you from getting on a plane and coming here. The thing that you worry about regulations either. Maybe you'll find there's some regulation later, but you don't even think that's an issue when you start off and go look at a deal. You find a deal, you're going. You find a couple deals that you're going strong. And, you know, I will tell you, Pittsburgh is an example. Pittsburgh has done a really good job. They have this triangle venture forums that they put on, and they create, and they market the bejesus out of it. You know, and then how they get me to go? I don't really want to go. I mean, but they get me to go. They invite me to go play golf at Oakmont. Okay, Oakmont is like, you know, one of the number 4 in the Golf Digest top 100. I'm a golfer. So a bunch of us go because we go play golf. Whatever it takes to get you here, right? But they have this thing, and the Three Rivers Venture thing. And they get everybody to show up, and all of a sudden, people are looking and investing. And there's good stuff, because you got, was it Carnegie Mellon there, right? Carnegie Mellon is the, and the great tech. You got everything I've just said exists, and then some in Toronto.
We paid $130 million to get Richard Florida out of Pittsburgh, rather than, you know, put $130 million into startups, yeah.
But, you know, you have everything here. This is, and there's no American, and I say this to you honestly, there's no American that doesn't think that Toronto is one of the great cities of the world. It really is. Everyone knows it. It's cosmopolitan. It's got amazing ethnic culture. It's got every kind of culture. It's got everything you could think of.
It's got a mayor with character.
Huh? It's got what?
Mayor with character.
Yeah. And by the way, there's not an American that I know that doesn't know who the mayor of Toronto is. I mean, and that's a joke, but it's okay. Sometimes you take advantage of the joke. It's like, you know, we sit there now and say, you want to talk about our weather? Okay. You know, so what do you think Kara Swisher, who owns Recode, she named us Silicon Snowbank. And I thought it worked, and it's great, and we're using it. Because what the fuck? What are you going to do? It is what it is. It snows, right? So what are we going to do? I'm going to deny it? No, I'm not going to deny it. I might as well take advantage of it. If you don't like snow, don't come. You know, but if you don't mind snow, it could be a great place to be. You guys got to take advantage of it. It's a phenomenal city with amazing talent and huge resources, not natural resources. Huge resources. Take advantage. You talk to athletes. I had a discussion one day. It's interesting. I had a discussion with Derek Jeter, just by coincidence, and I ran into him in Toronto. And I met him a couple times. He doesn't know me. But I met him a couple times. So I see him in New York, and we're talking. And I said, I met you in He says, oh, I love to. There's no city, it's my favorite city to go visit. I love walking around downtown Toronto. Derek Jeter, I mean, tonight's his last night playing for the Yankees, right? If they didn't get rained out. But, I mean, that's the way people look at it. So you guys got to do something about it.
Right.
And you've got to do something, because it's too big of an opportunity to waste.
We've done 27 of these, I think. I think this has been the best guest. Certainly got my blood boiling. He certainly.
This is hot.
You know, this is good.
The landlord turns the air conditioning off after 6, right? There's our host over there.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my
really,
pleasure.
really
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
I love to take charge.